Hey everyone, this is Fabri Loan and welcome back to a new video. You know what day is it today? Technically it's night over here in London, but it is video response day. Damn right. By the way, I'm drinking a lovely glass of red wine. Let's be sophisticated here. So we're in a good mood, as we need to be. Today, after all, we are going to do a good old video response to the Bottom Mappers on a specific topic they brought up, and oh boy, this is it, isn't it? The mother of all questions for our community. Retro gaming versus modern gaming. Which one is better? As I said, oh boy, get ready because this is going to be pretty long. Not surprising coming from me, as I love doing my long videos, but also because I think it's always an interesting topic on which there is a lot to be said, actually. Before going into this balls deep, we need to do some clarifications. What do we mean by retro gaming? What can be considered a retro console and game? First, a little background. Gaming to me started with the NES and early PC gaming. We're talking about crappy games on floppy disks that back then looked like $1 million, like earlier versions of Prince of Persia, Sokoban, Arkanoid, or another good one was called, I remember, Gorillas, or something like that. In which two players threw bananas at each other by calculating the speed and the angle, and when a banana hit the floor there was like a big explosion, and if you hit the other gorilla it would just disintegrate him. Truly epic stuff. That's as retro as you can go with me, basically. Since then I've continued playing video games, so I have roughly 30 years of continuous gaming experience under my belt. I moved from console to console, and here we are today, and I still have all of my original consoles from my NES, which technically wasn't even mine. It was my brother's, but he didn't care about it and passed it to me. Funny to think that's the snowball that started it all. To the Switch, my latest console. But what about the other side? Where is the line between retro and modern? When does a game become retro? I'm sure we all have different opinions on this, but since this is my video, to me everything before the PS3 generation is retro, basically. Which, if we want to get technical, that's the 7th gaming generation. This would include the 360, the Wii, PSP, DS, all of which to me are not retro yet, even though, to be honest, the latter two kinda are retro. It's hard not to think of them as retro anyways. Even though officially this generation started in 2004 with the release of the DS, I was still in high school back then. Jesus. The PS3 itself was released in 2007 here in Europe. So we are looking at a time period of at least 16 years. In the gaming world, that's a long time. Obviously, it's not that I got any of this day one. I bought the DS either in 2007 or 2008, in any case before I moved to the UK in 2009, since that was the only console I had with me for a while. And that's when I moved to the next generation officially. Regarding the PS3, I got mine for free, score of the century, I know, thanks to a friend who gave me his because he bought a PS4 that was started to be released at the time. So 2014, 15-ish. That's why, to me, this is not retro yet, because I got this stuff, basically, the PS3, just 5 years ago. So that generation, to me, is the borderline between retro and modern, while everything after this, including 3DS, Vita, Wii U, is all 100% contemporary. As said, we probably have different ideas and opinions on what is retro, especially considering that the closer we get to today, the blurrier the boundaries are. Some of you, for example, might consider the 3DS as totally retro for whatever reason, and that's fine. Taking all of this into account, where do I stand? Modern or retro? You would expect someone like me being a Jean of Arc or for the cause of retro gaming. After all, my good friend Leo the Funny Nerd often makes fun of me for wasting my time with older games while I should play some new and better ones instead. You'd be mistaken though, as retro is not my answer, but neither is modern. Yes, I'm going to take the, you might say, boring and obvious middle of the road ground on this matter and say both, because to me, because of the type of gamer I am, that's the only reasonable answer. I don't see why I should take a stand here, why I should make a choice that to me is absolutely unnecessary, especially considering that I got the same amount of fun from both retro and modern games. I don't think one is necessarily better than the other, as I can have the same amount of fun by playing a NES game or a Switch or PS4 game. It sounds ludicrous, but it's absolutely true to me of what I want out of a game, and that's why I constantly jump from system to system. For example, I am currently playing Stellar Glow on 3DS, 50 hours in. Next, depending on when I'll manage to finish Stellar Glow, I might move to the Switch due to the upcoming release of Treasure Cold Steel 3, my most anticipated game of the year. Then to the PS2, as I really want to play the two Digital Devil Saga games. And then we'll see. After all, if I take a look at my gaming collection here in London, I have so many options. I have a DS that can play GBA games as well, a PSP, PS Vita, 3DS, Switch, and a PS2. So 7 different consoles and libraries of games. The key of my entire argument here is the type of gamer I am. As you know, I'm a big RPG fan, JRPGs in particular. I primarily, I don't want to say exclusively, but I'm getting there, play these type of games. I might throw the occasional survival horror, first-person shooter, or side-scroller here and there, but I invest at least 90% of my gaming time in JRPGs. That's why I said I can get the same amount of fun from retro and modern games alike, as I enjoy them equally, because at the end of the day, the way I experience games is for one goal, and what I want out of them is the same from retro and modern, and that's a great story. Storytelling is by far the most important element of gaming to me, and this also includes other elements which are usually included under the big umbrella of story, such as characters, settings, script, all of that. When I play a game, what I want the most is to enjoy a great story, because video games allow me to enjoy storytelling in a different way than books, movies, anime, or other narrative vehicles. So story is the absolute king of gaming, while gameplay is nothing more than an instrument to experience the story. In a sort of comparison, I can see the story as the absolute ruler of gaming, while gameplay and graphics are the blue-collar elements of gaming. Finally, there's music, the cool, hip, bobo element like bourgeois bohemian. However, you can argue that music is actually a form of storytelling conveyed in a different way, though this is a long discussion from another time. It's definitely not just background noise though. If you think of music in gaming just as that, then you really are missing something, in my opinion. So story above everything to me. Of course, like always, there is the exception to the rule. Survival horror is my second favorite genre, and it's more about the gameplay and the overall horror experience, primarily through tension and setting, rather than their stories, which for the most part, let's be honest, are quite silly. In a great B-horror movie kind of way, though, that at the same time you can take seriously. And I loved it for this. As an example, look at my personal favorite survival horror, the original Dino Crisis. You have experiments on alternative energy that have caused a portal in space and time from which dinosaurs have arrived. How can you not love something this silly? It's amazing. Next, I want to discuss two things actually, that Spencer mentioned from Itch Network in his video response, in which I disagree with him. First is the matter of variety. Saying that modern games offer more variety doesn't sound right to me, and not just to blindly defend retro games, but because there was plenty of variety back then, just as much as today. It all depends on what you want to play. Maybe you can argue that modern games offer more variety simply because of the sheer amount of games we're getting, but because gaming today is much bigger than it used to be. But that's just a matter of perspective. To say there is no variety or not much in retro games, to me, it's just wrong. As back then, like now, you were able to play basically whatever you want and whatever you liked. RPGs, action games, platformers, fighting games, shmups, puzzle games, beat 'em ups, first-person shooters, etc. You got my point. Personally, and this is very controversial, and I think most of you might disagree with me on this, but I think there was an important element that perhaps made retro games actually a bit more varied than modern, and that it's PC gaming. As I said, I know most of you might disagree with me, but hear me out on this, because I think that PCs back then actually offered an additional level of variety to gaming overall. Because contrary to today, and I remember this very well as I experienced it, they were truly different and unique from consoles. They offered games that you simply couldn't find on consoles, thus adding to the overall variety. While now I feel that PC and console gaming is so homogenized that it's basically the same thing. I am sure there are still exclusives here and there, but it really feels that what made PC gaming truly unique has been lost. Though I've always been a console kid, for the longest time I've also always had a gaming PC to the side, because I knew that that was the only way I was able to play certain games. Strategy games, first-person shooters in a way, as we'll talk later, certain types of RPGs, because you couldn't play Baldur's Gate 2 on, say, the PS1, for example, etc. At the end of the day, it all comes down to what you like and what you want to play. In my case, for example, the variety of my collection is actually quite limited, thinking about it. But that's my choice. For the most part, as I said, I want to play RPGs. Those are the games I'm gonna get, either retro or modern. I have zero interest in complete collections because there are plenty of games and genres that I don't like, whether retro or modern. The second element in which I disagree with Spencer, especially the way he says it, is the overall topic of quality. I think he looks at this argument in a very simple way. Retro games' quality is so poor they can't compete with modern games, end of story. That is such an oversimplification of this, and in a way, kind of wrong. It's not because I'm blinded by nostalgia and thus I'm gonna say that PS1 games are so much better in quality than games today, because, come on. However, I think there's so much more to this. Obviously, gaming today has improved in quality. There's no comparison. After all, the technology behind them has improved so much from back in the day. But does this translate as instant better quality? It depends what you mean by quality. Graphically speaking, or what developers can do, of course modern games are better, because as said, consoles are so much more powerful and thus offer much more. But in terms of overall quality, I don't know. Once again, it comes down to the individual games to me. Saying that back then there were few good games and plenty of bad ones is just wrong. Retro consoles, just like their modern counterparts, are filled with good games. Not just Chrono Trigger, the generation's Final Fantasy, or the usual suspects we all know about. Just dig a bit deeper. These consoles have big libraries that offer good games across all genres. In my opinion, in a matter of ratio of good games to bad games, not much has changed actually. Saying that everything is good today is extremely disingenuous because guess what? There are plenty of good games and there are a lot of shitty games today, just like back in the day. To expand this a little bit because I find it very interesting, you can make the same exact argument regarding movies. If you say movies today are so much better because they look great, I would disagree with you thoroughly. The wine is starting to make some effects here, boys. As an example, Look at Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2. If you're going to say to my face, to this face, that the second one is better or even comparable to the first one because it looks so much better, I'm just gonna laugh at you. The first movie is a milestone that has inspired the sci-fi genre, and not only in movies but games as well, for example, and movies in general since its release. What about the sequel? Not so much. Sure, it looks good because of course it looks good. It's a blockbuster movie with a huge budget, but that's all it has to offer. Beside this, it's an extremely uninspiring, unoriginal movie that never needed to exist, but it does because they tried to capitalize on the popularity of the first movie. There was only one interesting element in that whole thing among its blandness, and they did really nothing with it. But you see what I mean? Just because something looks better or because you can do more doesn't mean that you will automatically do it better. Sometimes less is more. In a way, in a strange way, I'm more amazed by retro games, as sometimes they make me think, wow, they were able to do this on this old console? That's impressive. And I like this feeling, which by now it's totally gone for me. Back then, they had to be more creative because of the technical limitations. Now, on the other hand, you can do whatever you want, again, because the power of today's consoles. Obviously, this is not a negative. How can it be, after all? Developers can do unbelievable things. We have incredible looking games that can offer cinematic experiences, and I would say that Western games are particularly fond of this. But then I have to ask myself, do I care about this? And the answer is not really. In a simple way, I can argue that if I want a cinematic experience, I'll just watch a movie, because this is not what I want from games. As said, it comes back to that. What do you want from a game? As already said, I want stories. That's the thing. To me, stories today are not necessarily better than stories in retro games. There are great stories in today's games, absolutely, just like I experienced incredible stories back in the day. One element for which gaming today is getting a big thumbs up from me is the fact that it has become more common to have great stories in genres that traditionally weren't story focused. As an example, let's look at the genre that I've always enjoyed, though I never really talked about, and that is first-person shooters. Now, stories within first-person shooters are nothing new, but they have evolved so much throughout the years. Back then, they might had a general story, quite light in the form of the campaign, but the main focus was the first-person shooter experience, so the gameplay. Console-wise, the first first-person shooter I ever played was Doom on the Super Nintendo in 1995, and I loved it, even though it has zero story on purpose. But I didn't care, I just wanted to experience Doom. And still to this day, I love this game on the Super Nintendo. I know it's not the best port of it, but I love it nonetheless. Obviously, I played first-person shooters before it, like Wolfenstein 3D. But up until 1999, the genre to me was almost exclusive to PC, where I've played games such as Duke Nukem 3D, Shadow Warrior, Blood 2 The Chosen, Unreal, all great stuff. The next big thing on console actually happened in 1999, when I played the awesome first Medal of Honor on PS1. This was a big deal, as together with GoldenEye on N64, this is the game that kinda revolutionized first-person shooters on consoles. It has a cool campaign set in World War II that kinda started the whole craziness for more realistic World War II games. In fact, shortly after, we'll see the first Call of Duty. Again, the snowball there. And it's great on the PS1, but remember, the previous year, so in 1998, I played Half-Life on PC. And this game, it's a good first-person shooter, had a strong emphasis on narrative that I didn't expect. Obviously, I loved it, but more importantly, it was really the first of this kind that I experienced. Still, in 1999, While playing Medal of Honor, I also stumbled a little PC game called System Shock 2, which was jaw-dropping because it combined so many things that I love about gaming. From like the RPG elements, the horror element, the sci-fi, the first-person shooter. Truly revolutionary. Next, of course, the following step in story-driven first-person shooters were Halo and on the next generation, the BioShock games. So, stories can be a big deal even within genres which we don't usually associate with storytelling. And first-person shooters were just an examples. Nowadays, I think it's becoming more common to have more narrative elements in gaming, while back then, if you wanted a narrative experience, you usually played RPGs. Another big plus of modern gaming is without a doubt the rise of indie games, which are becoming more and more prevalent since the last generation. So let's try to conclude this since I've been going on for a long time, but this is such a big topic on which we can go on and on for hours. So, since to me it comes down to story, I am very comfortable in supporting both retro and modern games, as I have no reason to choose one over the other. As I said, you can find amazing stories in both, as I don't think that on average, modern games tell better stories than retro games, or vice versa. Some modern games have intrigued me very much and offer great experiences, like Nier or Xenoblade Chronicles, for example, while others, even very popular ones, were nothing to me, like Skyrim, a complete waste of time. Of course, I will never have the gaming-wise life-changing experiences that retro game gave me ever again, like Final Fantasy VI, Breath of Fire 3 or 4, Legend of Dragoon. These games were religious experience to me. I was so engrossed in those stories and so attached to those characters in a way that I haven't experienced ever since, and most likely never experience ever again. Not like this, at least, with this level of passion. Uh, as an example, Rose from Legend of Dragoon is my favorite video game character of all time. I don't think I ever been attached to a character as much as with Rose. Her story, the way she interacts with the rest of the party that changes completely throughout the game due to her amazing development, her inner struggle, her final sacrifice, a truly fantastic and timeless video game character. You can argue they were just the right games at the right time, but that's what makes us the gamers we are. It's all about those games during those times in our life that have long-lasting impact. And this is true for every one of us. I've experienced Final Fantasy VI, Breath of Fire, and Legend of Dragoon during my formative years, and they had an everlasting impact on me and made me the gamer I am today. They offered me a total new level of storytelling that I wasn't prepared for, and I didn't even know games can offer. I know that I will never experience anything like this ever again, not because modern games can't reach these levels of storytelling, because I know they can, but because I've changed. I'm an adult now. I'm a different person in how I experience this stuff. It's in no small part because of those games. So there you have it, my, you can say, non-answer to this huge topic. Retro games, modern games. At the end of the day, why choose? I can't help it. For some of you it's an easy or obvious answer, but not to me, as I love them both and cannot pick one over the other. I love the fact that I have the opportunity to jump from one to the other and experiencing great stories of old and great contemporary ones. Thoughts? Let me know in the comment section below, so we can keep this very interesting conversation going, or do a video response to the Bottom Mappers to fully elaborate your feelings on it. In the meanwhile, thanks so much for listening, take care and stay safe.